6 things that break a real estate deal. So I want to walk you through 6 real situations from actual deals I've worked on where something came up that could have completely killed the transaction. Not hypotheticals, real clients, real numbers, real moments where things almost fell apart. I'm Steven. I'm a realtor here in the Bay Area. I've done over 100 deals as a solo agent. I come from a background of flipping homes as well, so I tend to look at these situations a little differently than most agents. Every deal has some kind of twist to it somewhere. The real skill isn't avoiding that. It's seeing it come before it happens or knowing exactly what to do the moment it shows up. So let's get into these. Section 1, the condo, where buyer's own lender wasn't the problem, a state law was. Picture this. You list a condo, you do everything right, staging, inspections, a clean disclosure packet, and then you found out most lenders in the country won't touch the property, and it has nothing to do with the unit itself. This was a listing of client of mine, someone I've already helped buy their new home, and now we were selling their condo. They wanted $750,000 for it. We listed it at $699. I came in, did all the fixes we needed, got staging in there, prepped the place, ordered inspection, and made sure we had a really robust disclosure packet. Because I already had a feeling something was coming. Here's what was coming. There's a law called AB 326 that requires HOAs and condo associations to basically inspect the exterior elevated elements. Things like the balconies, elevated walkways, and if there's damage, they have to check the whole complex, not just the individual unit. The HOA on this property completed their inspection, and the report came back saying repairs were definitely needed somewhere in the complex. Once that happens, the HOA is legally required to put a plan in place to complete the work. Now here's where it got tricky, very tricky. Our specific unit didn't need any work at all, didn't matter. Because of that report, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac decided they wouldn't lend on that property, period. It doesn't matter if the issue has nothing to do with your specific unit. They still won't finance it. That basically eliminated conventional financing, which is where buyers get their best rates. So before we even had a buyer, I got proactive. I called several agents who closed on units in the same complex over the past 6 months to a year and asked who their buyer lender was. Agents were really nice about sharing that information. I interviewed a couple of those lenders myself and found they do what's called a non-warrantable loan, like a portfolio loan. However, higher interest rates, usually you have to put 20% down instead of the 5% Fannie and Freddie would offer for condo like this. I put that information into the listing, so any interested buyer without their own financing lined up could go straight to one of these lenders or come in with cash. We end up getting multiple offers. The first offer that came in actually had their own lender who already did this exact type of loan. I still talked to that lender myself, asked questions, made sure I understood exactly what we were working with. And here's the part I actually loved about this deal. Everyone who came through the open house, I had a real conversation about what their lending options were and shared that information so other buyers who didn't understand the process could go get pre-approved too and still put in a competitive offer. My clients understood going in that we might end up getting something less than the $750,000 they originally wanted because of the financing complication. But because we were proactive about lining up lenders ahead of time, we still ended up with multiple offers on the table. Whole thing from listing the prep to close took about a month to get into contract, then closed within 3 weeks after that. About 2 months total. Section 2, the duplex with a unit that wasn't supposed to exist. What if one appliance sitting in the wrong room could completely change what loan your buyer qualifies for? So I had a client buying a duplex and there was a third unit on the property that wasn't included in the official square footage. That's what's called a non-conforming unit. Here's why that matters. In the Bay Area, when the comps support it, buyers will often strengthen their offer by waiving the appraisal contingency, the loan contingency, and the inspection contingency. In this case, I personally specifically advise my client not to do that, not to waive the appraisal contingency because of that third unit. Here's the risk. If an appraiser walks through the property and counts that third space as a legitimate separate living unit, meaning it has its own kitchen setup, the property can get reclassified from a duplex into a triplex. Especially when it's not permitted, because that's why it's non-conforming, the lender might not lend on it. And a triplex might not qualify for the same loan program my client was using to buy it as a duplex, possibly. So here's what we did, all right? We removed the stove from that non-conforming unit. Without a full kitchen, an appraiser is going to count it as a duplex, not a triplex, because the stove is usually the thing that tips the space into being classified as its own separate unit. And I didn't just leave that to chance. I showed up to the appraisal myself. I spoke directly with the appraiser and confirmed that the stove was gone, so everything lined up and the loan could go through exactly as planned. That's the kind of detail that never shows up on a normal walkthrough of a buyer. You have to already be thinking about it before you ever write the offer. Section 3 now. So imagine your buyer's lender tells them they're fully qualified, no issues, ready to close, and then just days before closing, that same lender calls back and says, actually, it's not going to work. You are not qualified for this loan. This happened with a buyer who decided to use their own lender, someone I hadn't worked with before. Before we got anywhere near waiving contingencies, I had a conversation with the lender myself, and something about it just didn't sit right with me. She didn't come across as fully confident that this loan was going to hold up if we waived the contingency. Because of that, I told my client directly, I don't feel comfortable waiving your loan contingency based on the conversation I have with the lender that you picked. It was a lot of risk. The earnest money deposit is usually 3% of the purchase price, and if the loan doesn't get approved for some odd reason, then my client is on the hook for that earnest money deposit. I'm just glad my client listened to me. Good thing we did not waive the loan contingency. The lender came back and said the buyer actually didn't qualify, and the reason had to do with a job gap between two positions the buyer had held. And here is the frustrating part. Before that, the same lender had told us the buyer was qualified, no problem. We even asked specifically about the job gap. So here's how I fixed it. I have a database of lenders I've worked with over the years, and a small group of them at the top that I trust and know will be straight with me. I brought one of them in, and my client was still able to close within about 6 to 7 days after that new lender came, and we still hit every single timeline in the contract. The lesson here isn't just don't waive your loan contingency if you're not fully underwritten. It's that having your agent talk directly to the lender before you make that decision tells you a lot more than just trusting a buyer's own confidence in their financing. Anything can happen during escrow with financing, anything. Just know that your earnest money deposit is on the line, and the risk is you may lose your earnest money deposit if you decide to waive the loan contingency. Because unfortunately, not every lender is straight with you. Some will say what they think gets the deal moving instead of what's actually true. Section 4, the lateral that made my client walk away, and I think they made the right call. Sometimes the thing that kills a deal isn't some massive structural nightmare at a house, right? Sometimes it's a $5,000 to $10,000 problem that just doesn't fit in someone's budget, and that's a completely fair reason to walk away from a deal. I had a transaction where the seller had already provided a full set of inspections upfront, home, pests, roof, all of it. But the home was older and there were a lot of trees around the property. They did not provide us for a lateral inspection. Because of that, we didn't feel comfortable fully waiving our inspection contingency. Specifically, we wanted to check the lateral to ensure it doesn't need to be replaced, since fixing one of these can run anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 depending on the condition and the length of the line. So for this deal specifically, we wrote in a 3-day inspection contingency just for that inspection. Sure enough, the inspection came back showing roots had gotten into the line. It wasn't an emergency. It didn't need to be fixed immediately, but it would need to be monitored and eventually need replacing. My client looked at the cost, looked at their actual budget, and made the call to back out. I think that's such an important point for people to hear. Owning a home costs money beyond just the mortgage. If you don't have the extra $5 or $10 or $15,000 sitting in reserve for something like a sewer lateral, that's a conversation worth having honestly with yourself before you're deep into a deal, not after. Section 5, the multifamily deal I walked away from even though there was no single smoking gun. Sometimes the biggest red flag isn't one specific problem you can point to. It's that every question you ask leads to another question nobody can answer. I was working with a client looking at a multifamily property, and something about the disclosures didn't feel right. We didn't see properly filled out lease agreements. We didn't see a profit and loss statement. We didn't see estoppels, which are basically confirmations from the current tenants about the actual terms of their lease. So we started asking a lot of questions. The more we dug, the more we found. There had been a lawsuit on the property in the past connected to illegal housing that wasn't disclosed. And there was a lot of tenant turnover that nobody clearly explained. There wasn't one single deal breaker moment. It was more that every answer led to another question. And none of the answers ever felt complete. It didn't feel real. At some point, my client and I just agreed. This is a deal we walk away from, regardless of the price. The price was nice. For a multifamily in the Bay Area, it was a good deal. I'm genuinely proud of moments like that one. It would have been easy to just push forward and hope everything worked out. But honestly, I'd rather walk away from a deal than put a client into a situation where it's going to cost them more money down the road because of something that started long before they even owned the property. Section 6, the lien that almost stopped the closing and wasn't as simple as just paying it off. Here's something that catches a lot of sellers off guard. You order your preliminary title report expecting it to be routine. You always get the prelim, sometimes even before you write the offer or during escrow. And instead, you find out there's a lien on the property that has to be dealt with before you can close. I was representing a seller on this one, and once we ordered the preliminary title report, it showed a mechanic's lien on the property. So I contacted my seller and told him straight up, this lien is happening and we can't close until it's paid off. Here's the part that people don't expect. It's not as simple as, hey, let me just call the person who filed a lien and pay them and we're all good. You actually have to put a formal agreement in place, and the person who filed a lien has to go back to the city where they originally filed it in order to have it removed. And most of the time, they won't do that until they actually been paid for the work they did. So there's real coordination around it that has to happen between the seller and the contractor before the sale can move forward. Which, if you're working with a specific close of escrow time, then this is something you should know. It's a good reminder that title issues aren't always something dramatic like a lawsuit. Sometimes it's a lien from a contractor who did work years ago that nobody thought to resolve. Sometimes it's an incorrect lien and someone put a lien on a house that didn't even belong to that person. And it can sit there quietly until you're trying to close. So that's 6 real situations. A state law that wiped out financing on a condo that didn't even need repairs, a duplex where removing a stove saved the loan, a lender who backed out days before closing, and a sewer lateral that made the numbers not work for my client. A multifamily deal we walked away from because too many questions never got good answers, and a mechanic's lien that had to be resolved before a seller could close. None of these got solved with luck. They got solved by looking for the twist before it happened, or knowing exactly what to do the moment it showed up. That's a realtor's job. That's my job. If you want someone looking out for these kind of things on your own purchase or sale, reach out and let's talk through it. And if house hacking is part of your plan, I put together a free guide called the Bay Area House Hacking Starter Kit. Links in the description. Grab it and let's figure out what makes sense for you.